Chapter 493. His eyes, at that moment, seemed to return to the past, the deep pain and the endless scars. He was like a child, his lips trembled, tears filled his eyes. Bailu is gone. He trembled as he faced Lu Sweki. Tears finally flowed out of his eyes, like a wounded child finally crying. Decades of sorrow could no longer be tolerated. He grabbed Lu Sweki's shoulders, hugged her in his arms, cried loudly, his mouth choked with sobs. Bailu is gone. Bailu is gone. Bailu is gone. Anan never thought this strong man would be so weak in front of her. But at this moment, her heart was only left with tenderness. She hugged him tightly, desperately trying to use every bit of warmth in her body to comfort the crying soul. Behind the boiling hot tears, she kept whispering to the man, and also to herself, "Don't worry, don't worry. It will be okay. Everything will be okay." This night was especially long and sad. After that night, Shah Danan woke up from the heart devil's nightmare, but not long after, he had a high fever again. With his current cultivation, it was impossible for him to have any disease. But this fever, his whole body was burning, his mind was not clear. Anan more or less knew this sickness was caused by the pain in his heart. Bailu's death was the trigger, but most of it was the heart barrier that Shah Danan struggled to support for the past 10 years. Instead, it was the root of the sickness, and no one could cure it. As expected, no matter how Anan tried to cure Shah Danan, no matter what kind of elixir she gave Shah Danan, it was like a clay ox entering the sea, no effect at all. The fever was unimaginably fierce. It did not subside, even after 10 days. If it was a normal person, they would have already died. And now, even Shah Danan could not be more haggard. He looked like a bag of bones. Anan was very worried. She had been guarding Shah Danan for 10 days. She became thinner. Perhaps it was her infatuation. God finally opened his eyes and showed mercy. On the 11th day, when Anan was about to despair, Shah Danan's fever finally went down. Although the fever was gone, but Shah Danan was still unconscious. Even so, Anan was still relieved. Her heart was slightly relaxed for nervousness. A wave of tiredness came from every corner of her body. She forced herself to tidy Ghost Lee's clothes, then leaned on Ghost Lee and fell into a deep sleep. On her beautiful face, a faint, reassuring smile. Even in her sleep, her hand was still holding Ghost Lee's arm. A breeze blew past the ruins of Grass Temple Village. The green grass fluttered, clustered around their bodies. Heaven and earth were silent. Only this forgotten corner of the world seemed to have an unusual sense of peace and happiness. She didn't know how long she slept. The stars moved, and the fragrance of flowers filled her eyes. She felt like she was in a dream. She saw everything she once dreamed of. To be with the person I love for a lifetime. Then she woke up. With a reassuring and happy smile on her lips, she gently opened her eyes. The body beside her was still there. He was peacefully sleeping. His breath was beside her. Anan did not move. It was as if this was what she liked the most. She quietly leaned on him and listened to his deep breathing. Suddenly, at this moment, in the direction of Jade Hill, an explosion suddenly sounded in the sky. Then a huge firework bloomed. Anan's face changed. She frowned. She slowly sat up and turned to look. The fireworks slowly turned into a long sword in the sky. It did not dissipate for a long time. It was the rarely used signal in Jade Hill. Only when there was a great change in the sect, only when all the disciples were gathered, would it be released. Anan was silent for a moment. Her eyes returned to Shah Danan for a moment, then slowly stood up. After a moment of hesitation, she took Aeolian Firmus from the wall, floated away. The wind was still blowing. The grass was also swaying back and forth. Shah Danan was sleeping quietly in the bush. Suddenly a head popped out from the deep of the bush. It was a three-eyed gray monkey. It looked around, then squeaked twice. It seemed surprised that Anan was missing. Then it jumped onto Shah Danan's chest, rubbed its head, then sat down. Shah Danan was still sleeping peacefully. Only his right hand's fingers slightly trembled. After about half a cup of tea's time, a light sound was heard from the entrance of Grass Temple Village. Ainan's white figure appeared again. She walked toward Shah Danon. Ash, who was sitting on Shah Danon's chest, made a face at Ainan, jumped down, sat on the side, and looked around. Ainan slowly walked to Zhang Xiaofan's side and slowly knelt down beside him. However, on her face, there was no longer the peace and happiness from before. There was only heaviness and a trace of pain. Xiaofan, something happened. Her voice sounded so empty, as if she had no strength at all as she said faintly, "I saw the emergency signal to gather the disciples. I went over to take a look. While we were here, something big had happened outside. The Ghost King sect that you used to be in, that sect head, Ghost King, had obtained some kind of demonic magical weapon and could actually steal one's mind and use it for himself. What was even more frightening was it was said that he was hiding in a huge red shadow bloody light. As long as the red shadow went, no matter if it was the common people or the cultivators who had attained Tao, all would turn into mindless living dead and be controlled by him." Ainan's face was pale. She held Tianya tightly, but her eyes on Shah Danon were still filled with tenderness and reluctance. Previously, the good faction had already launched several encirclement attacks against him, but they were all wiped out, not to mention that the sects suffered heavy losses. But the most frightening thing was that most of the people had their minds stolen by the red light. They became Ghost King's slaves and thugs. In turn, they slaughtered the good faction. Now the world's good is in a complete defeat. That Ghost King has already approached the foot of Mount Jadian. Using his evil arts, he managed to confuse the minds of all the people within 100 miles of Mount Jadian, including Sunstream City. Including those people, the total number is no less than 100,000. Looks like they are about to attack Mount Jadian. She stared at Shah Danon's face. Suddenly, 2 lines of tears fell from her eyes. The tears fell on the back of Shah Danon's hand. "I wanted to disregard everything and stay with you forever. Even if I am despised by the world, punished by the sect, I don't care. But now. Her lips trembled. She slowly lowered her head. "But now Jadian is in trouble. It was Jadian who raised me. It was my master who loved me and taught me. If it is only for us to be together, even if they scold me, I am willing. But now they are in trouble. I can only go back and be with them." Ainan stared deeply at Shah Danon's face. Her eyes did not move away for a moment. It seemed like she did not want to give up. Her clothes fluttered in the wind. "Perhaps you still don't know. Jadian is an internal strife. The once invincible retribution sword array can no longer be activated. I'm afraid it will be a disaster. I don't know if I can come back to see you." Ainan took a deep breath, wiped away the tears on her face. Then, a bitter smile appeared on her lips. She looked at Shah Danon and said, "Xiaofan, I don't know if it is heaven's will. We never have the fate to stay together. But," she paused. After a moment, with a low but firm voice, quietly said, "But I never regret." Then, she bent down and kissed Shah Danon's lips. The warm feeling spread throughout his body. A faint, happy feeling. She smiled, but her lips stood up. She looked at the sleeping man for the last time, then turned and walked away. She walked so slowly, it seemed like she wanted to turn around and look again. But in the end, she did not turn around and look again. Perhaps, even she knew, if she turned around, she would not have the courage to leave. Her white clothes fluttered. She finally left. The grass moved with the wind. Ash quietly came, climbed onto Shah Danon's chest, silently watched the white figure go away. Under it, Shah Danon's palm, his fingers moved again. The wind was still blowing. Time passed quietly. Grass Temple Village fell into a long silence again. The day passed, the night came. The stars shined, watching the vicissitudes of the world. Ash sat on Shah Danon's chest. It seemed a little sleepy. It opened its mouth and yawned, making a few squeak, squeak, squeak sounds. Then, as if it suddenly felt something, its eyeballs turned and looked at Shah Danon. A low gasp was heard. Shah Danon slowly opened his eyes. The first thing that entered his eyes was the boundless blue dome of heaven. The deep darkness was dotted with countless shining stars. He didn't move and just lay there quietly, looking at the sky. Ash seemed a little puzzled. It rubbed its head and crawled over to take a look. but then it shrunk back. The night wind was gentle. The grass swayed. The deep darkness had been like this for thousands of years. A human's life, compared to it, was like a firefly compared to the sun and moon. It was just a blink of an eye. Perhaps it was because the ancient people understood this. That's why they persistently pursued immortality. But if it was just an empty shell, so what if immortality was achieved? His expression was very calm, a calmness that had never been seen before. There was no more sorrow or excitement. He only silently looked up at the sky. The sky was endless. The stars moved. The world was silent. Only the sound of the wind blew. Before he knew it, the sky was bright. But the morning light fell. When the last darkness disappeared, Shah Danon closed his eyes. He quietly lay there for a long time, until the sun rose. When the warm sunlight shined on him, he opened his eyes again. This time he stood up. Standing in place, he looked around. The ruins that were buried in the weeds were desolate, but familiar. There were many places that had been deeply engraved in his heart since many years ago and would never be erased. There were also many places that were left behind by the pure joy of running and playing when he was young. He strolled forward, his footsteps stepping on the green grass without making a sound. Xiao Hui scurried over from the side, grabbed his clothes, and climbed up to his shoulder in a few moves and sat down. Woo! The wind blowing from his back seemed to have grown a little stronger, letting out a soft, whistling sound. The grass beside him rose and fell with the wind, like a wave. The ruins were like a silent but gentle person. They stared at him. He walked to the north side of the village. There was another ruin. It was even more dilapidated. Looking from afar, it looked like the dilapidated temple. This time, Ghostly stood for a longer time. He stared deeply at the ruins of the small temple. After a long time, on his lips, revealed a faint, cordial smile. That smile was gentle. There was no trace of hatred or regret. Then, he turned around and walked away, never looking back again. Let's go. Ash. Zhi. The monkey called out softly on his shoulder and rubbed its head. Where? He smiled faintly. Facing the breeze, he smiled and said, to where we should go. His eyes moved, gazing afar at the towering Qingyun Hill, piercing through the clouds. On Qingyun Hill, Tongtian Peak, it was a scene of hustle and bustle. But near the rear of the mountain, it seemed even more secluded. There was not even a shadow of a person. Probably because of the pressure from the enemy and the disappearance of Reverend Daoxian. No one would notice this. When the afternoon came, the sunlight shone on the secluded forest. Ghostly was already walking on the quiet forest path. This was not the first time he had come to the back mountain of Tongtian Peak. In fact, he had been here several times, so he was already familiar with the surrounding terrain. However, his expression did not show any signs of worry or anxiety. On his face, there was still the same calm smile that he had since he had woken up as he walked slowly. Chapter 494. The mountain path was rugged. Both sides were filled with ancient trees. From time to time, from deep within the forest came the sound of birds singing. Ghostly's eyes turned from the forest to the ground, and then to the front, the winding ancient path, not knowing how many past events had happened on it. The mountain forest was quiet. The wind was gentle, seemingly not tainted by the mortal world. The familiar three-way intersection in his memory slowly appeared in front of him. Shah Danon stopped at the intersection. His eyes unexpectedly looked to the right, behind the layers of dense forest. Between the gaps of the dense foliage, faintly revealed the corner of the imposing founder's ancestral hall. He smiled, turned, and stepped onto that small path. The intersection was not far from the founder's ancestral hall. Soon the solemn hall gradually appeared, but Shah Danon did not walk to the open space. He only quietly stood behind a lush tree beside the mountain path, gazing toward that direction. The hall was still that dim. The stone steps and open space in front of the door was still like countless days in the past, covered with fallen leaves. After a while, a white figure walked out from the main hall. He was handsome and had an extraordinary bearing. There was a gentle smile on his face. There was no sharp sword in his hand. Instead, there was a broom woven from bamboo. He looked at the fallen leaves on the ground. His face revealed a slight smile, raised his hands and stretched, deeply breathed in the slightly sweet forest air, then began to quietly sweep the fallen leaves on the ground. The broom fluttered. The fallen leaves were swept aside bit by bit. Among them, some were like disobedient children blown up by the wind, stubbornly trying to return to their original place, were also swept back by him again with a smile. The wind passed through the forest, the rustling of the forest. Far away, behind the tree, Shah Danon quietly watched that familiar white figure, revealing a knowing and quiet smile. On the open space, Bay seemed to suddenly feel something. His hands paused for a moment, turned and looked toward the mountain path leading to the outside world. Only that the mountain path was empty, other than the ancient trees and shrubs, or was there any trace of other figures? He startled for a moment, then shook his head and smiled. Perhaps he had heard wrongly. Thinking like that, he picked up the broom and swept again. Behind the distant, dense forest, Shah Danon slowly walked, getting further and further away from the Founder's ancestral hall. Very soon, he once again came to that three-way intersection. This time, he looked toward the direction of the Phantom Moon Cave, and without any hesitation, he crossed the forbidden area, slowly walked toward it. He could clearly feel, deep inside the Phantom Moon Cave, there seemed to be a mysterious power constantly calling him, making him go to that place. This feeling, when he was still in the ruins of Grass Temple Village, it was already exceptionally strong. Standing in front of the Phantom Moon Cave, Shah Danon stopped, staring at the mysterious place in front of him. From that small stone door, Qing Yun, sex prodigy of a generation, Qing Yi Taoist, had once walked out. There had once been numerous influential figures in the past years who left their footprints here. This illusory moon cave had actually been the witness of Qing Yun's sect's 2,000 years of rise and fall, glory and disgrace. But now, in front of Shah Danon, it was only a normal cave. He smiled and walked in, as if he had returned home, without the slightest hesitation. The sunlight outside the cave was blocked by the stone walls and could not reach the inside of the cave. The inside of the cave was very cold, and the simple scene was the same as when he first came here. Even the Tai Chi pattern hanging on the wall was the same as before. Shah Danon walked over, put his hand on the Tai Chi pattern. A faint light flashed. That was Jadian's true Shin art. In the light, the Tai Chi pattern slowly reacted, brightened up. After a moment, just like he expected, the wall next to him slowly moved away, revealing the strange water like swirling white mist door. Shah Danon stared at the unfathomable swirling waves. The last time he entered it, he was triggered by the mysterious power contained in it and almost fell into a state of eternal damnation. Now that he was facing it again, there seemed to be a faint suction force in the depths of the waves, giving him the illusion that he was falling into it. He took a deep breath, no longer hesitated, took a step, and walked in. A sense of coolness hit his face. It was like he really stepped into a deep water world. But after a moment, Shah Danon found himself was the same as last time, surrounded by a world of nothingness. It was pitch black, boundless, with no light and no end. Ash, who was lying on his shoulder, seemed a little uneasy, moved a little, and let out 2 low growls. Shah Danon gently patted the monkey's head, like comforting it. Ash also calmed down. Then Shah Danon looked forward, but in his eyes there was nothing but darkness. He watched for a long time, did not move, until finally a faint smile appeared on his lips, but he closed his eyes and walked forward. After a few steps, the death-like silence was suddenly broken. Boom! A gust of hot air hit him. Shah Danon could clearly feel like he walked into a sea of fire. His skin and flesh were suddenly burned by the fire. Pain came from every corner of his body, like his entire body was going to be destroyed in the sea of fire. However, his eyes were tightly shut. Even when the muscles on his face were slightly contorted due to the intense pain, the corners of his mouth still maintained a faint smile. Step by step, although it was slow but continued to walk forward. On his shoulder, Ash let out a frightened cry. It sounded very frightened, but Shah Danon held it in his arms, let Ash's head deeply buried in his chest, no longer looked outside. Soon, it seemed like it was the master's palm and the heartbeat in his chest. Ash calmed down, lying motionlessly. The sound of the burning fire was getting louder. Even the air around him seemed to have a horrible burning smell. The pain in his body increased. Every step was like he had to endure thousands of times more pain. But his footsteps still did not stop. Slowly and firmly walked forward. Not knowing when, he felt the violent sea of fire slowly faded away. Around him, it was a vast silence of nothingness again. The pain in his body also disappeared. In the silence, suddenly, a clear sound of water dripping rang in his ears. The cold water came from nowhere, fell from nothingness, fell on Shaw Dannon's face. Bone-chilling cold. In a moment, without any warning, a loud rumble came from the front, covering the sky and earth like it was everywhere. Shaw Dannon's mind clearly portrayed that terrible scene. The huge wave like a dragon, 10,000 jongs high, crashing down. Anything that stood in front of it was as small as an ant. Even the towering Qingyun Hill was also instantly destroyed and swallowed by it. The biting cold wind instantly tore his body apart. The pain that was 10 times more intense than the burning. Fire once again came from every corner of his body. Shaw Dannon never knew a person's body could actually suffer such torment, to feel such intense pain. Even his indomitable nerves seemed to collapse before this pain. Thousands of hands were tearing him. Even he could not continue to breathe. As if he was trapped in the deep sea, the endless pressure immediately pressed him into powder, turning into the water of silence. Even if he was going to die, before he died, he should at least open his eyes and look around. Like a lamp, this thought suddenly appeared in the depths of his heart, flashing constantly, like a temptation. Shaw Dannon took a deep breath, slowly continued to walk forward, close his eyes tightly. The coldness of the waves seemed to be angered, suddenly became more and more furious. The roar was deafening. Like the feeling of being cut by thousands of knives came one after another. Shaw Dannon's forehead was already covered with cold sweat, his face extremely pale, but he still maintained the remaining clear-headedness before collapse, still walking slowly. Step by step, never stopping, just like life, slowly moving forward, in the end cannot turn back. The tide slowly receded. The deafening and terrifying sound also disappeared. Silence once again returned to his side. In the void, only the echoes of his footsteps seemed to echo. One person, walking alone, Xiao Fan. Suddenly, a voice faintly called from his back. At that instant, Shaw Dannon was like he was struck by lightning. His body shook violently. An unbelievable expression appeared on his face. For the first time, he uncontrollably stopped his steps. His eyes were still closed, but his lips began to tremble, a bit choked, a bit like his heart was being cut by a knife, a bit hopeless. Quietly said, "Bello." That familiar voice seemed to be right behind him, infinitely tender, with a bit of unforgettable gentleness that he yearned for day and night. Faintly said, "Xiao Fan, are you ignoring me? Turn around and look at me." Shaw Dannon's body began to slowly tremble. His body was like caught in a fierce battle. Several times he wanted to turn around, but he endured it. Although there was no pain, but at this moment his clothes were soaked in sweat, his face twisted. It was more painful than the terrible fire burning him, the coldness of the deep sea. A low but clear call softly floated behind him, like it would never end. This life of hardship, isn't it for that voice? Why, still not turn around? Ah! He suddenly roared. His body trembled. His teeth clenched. The bones of his body cracked, like he had reached the limit of endurance. But it was not over yet. Besides Bailu's voice calling him, slowly, he heard other people's voices. Those were all unforgettable people in his life. Dad, Mom, Posy Master, Tiambali, Serene. Endless, the voices came and went, wave after wave, calling him. The past of his life flashed past like smoke, scene by scene. Thousands of mountains and rivers, one person trekking. Sunset, snow, 1,000 mountains, one shadow, walking alone. He did not want to be lonely, did not want to live forever. What he wanted was to be together with the person he loved. He hugged his head and cried. Like a child, there was no place to hide. Tears fell on his palm. There was a faint warmth. The endless cries around him were still calling out to him, lingering around him, tempting him to open his eyes and turn around. However, that faint warmth suddenly caused his trembling body to calm down. This familiar and warm feeling seemed to be something he had felt not too long ago. There was once a person, when he was on the verge of collapse, stayed by his side, in countless dark nights, hugged him tightly, used the warmth of her body to warm him. There was also a time when he was half awake and half dreaming in that void of darkness. In a trance, warm tears fell on his face. In this frighteningly cold world, it told him that he was not alone. In this life, thousands of mountains and rivers, the sunset, snow, thousand mountains not alone. The countless voices around him suddenly became urgent, like they were stimulated by something, continued to call him with a bit of sadness. But Shah Danan's body slowly stood up. The pain on his face was slowly replaced by a sense of peace. Then he smiled softly, with a deep reluctance, a longing that was engraved in his bones, and a faint smile. Then he turned and walked, leaving all the voices behind him, letting the voice cry out, and then, in a shrill sound, gradually quieted down. Silence once again descended upon them. A light cough came from in front of him. It was an old voice, with a bit of fragility, a bit of surprise. "So, it is you." Shah Danan stood on the spot, took a deep breath, slowly let out a long breath, and slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 495. Shah Danan had never thought what he would see when he opened his eyes would be such a world. Everything in front of him was not what he had imagined, a cave hidden deep inside the mountain. In front of him was another ancient, desolate, and strange place. A vast and boundless desolate Gobi desert lay in front of him. There were no trees or flowers, only dark gray rocks and sand. The wind blew across the Gobi desert, carrying with it a sharp whistling sound. Above his head was a strange firmament. Dark purple thick clouds pressed down on this world until it was suffocating. In the clouds, there were constantly huge white lightnings striking down from the sky, streaking across the horizon. In the farthest horizon was a dark green halo. That place was especially bright, like a resplendent radiance at the end of the darkness, and countless meteors streaked across the horizon, emitting blazing and dazzling light. In the sky, turned into a magnificent and spectacular meteor shower. After a long while, Shah Danan slowly retracted his gaze. His shocked mood gradually calmed down, looked ahead in the desolate desert. Not far in front of him, there was an altar, dark gray, huge rocks as the base. There were stairs on all 8 sides, 7 levels up and down. On the altar, there were 7 huge pillars, divided into 7 colors. Each pillar, several zhang tall, needed 3 people to encircle. Ordinary people on this altar looked as tiny as ants. In the middle of the altar, there was an ancient cauldron. Right now, there was a person leaning against the cauldron, his face full of fatigue, looking extremely old, looking at Shah Danan. Shah Danan's body was shocked. This person who looked extremely old was the current Jadian sect head, Reverend Doyle Shun. Reverend Doyle Shun right now did not have any cold black energy around him, looked far from his usual sage-like appearance that commanded the world. He seemed to be panting softly, watching ghostly walking over, suddenly smiled, said, "Didn't expect that you can actually rely on your own strength. Walk through that illusory moon way. Really amazing." Shah Danan was silent for a moment, then turned around and saw the place where he came from. There was a stone door. Different from the surrounding desolate scenery of this world, inside this 10 feet tall and 6 feet wide stone door, it was completely dark. Looking at it from far, he could vaguely see a layer of swirling mist. It seemed like the passage was not long. Just that Shah Danan looked at that darkness, recalling the scene just now, still had a lingering fear, but after a moment, a faint smile appeared on his lips, again turned and looked at Reverend Doyle Shun. This person in front of him could be said to have directly killed his most respected teacher Tian Bai, and also indirectly caused the death of his teacher's wife, Serene. Just that right now, Reverend Doyle Shun, who looked weak but without any hostility, Shah Danan's heart did not seem to have any desire for revenge. "Are you all right?" He slowly walked to Reverend Doyle Shun, quietly asked. Reverend Daoxian looked at him. His tired face suddenly revealed a trace of strange smile, but he did not ask him about past grievances, instead asked, "Why did you come here?" Shah Danan was silent for a moment, then said lightly, "I think it should come, so I came." Reverend Doyleshin looked at him, slowly laughed. He laughed louder and louder, shook his head and said, "What a good should come, and so it will come, ha ha." He laughed wantonly and savagely, as if his expression was gradually becoming intense. Zhang Xiaofan did not ask anything, did not interrupt him, only watched quietly. After a long while, Reverend Daoxian's laughter then slowly stopped. His face still looked exhausted, but in his eyes, a strange glint had already started to sharpen and brighten. "Don't you want to avenge your teacher?" Reverend Daoxian suddenly said to him indifferently. Zhang Xiao Danan did not reply, still quietly looking at Reverend Doyle Shun. His gaze was calm and peaceful, as if carrying a faint trace of benevolence. But the monkey Xiao Hui in his arms seemed to be uneasy, moved a few times, left his embrace, once again climbed onto his shoulder and sat down. Reverend Daoxian's body seemed to tremble slightly. His countenance also slowly changed. The tired expression gradually disappeared. The sharp glint in his eyes instead became brighter and brighter. The imposing manner that once looked down on the world, like the tide flowing backwards, swiftly returned to his body. That terrible and formless force, even Zhang Xiao Danan, who was standing beside, could clearly feel it from Reverend Daoxian's body. He slowly stood up. Strands of black gas emerged from his body, circled around him rapidly. The ruthless aura reappeared. He stared at Zhang Xiao Danan, laughed again, and this time it seemed to be savage. "Or is it, you are afraid?" Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound burst out from behind Reverend Daoxian. That ancient cauldron was instantly shattered by a huge force, fragments flying everywhere. In the smoke, Zhang Xiao Danan's pupils contracted slightly. A broken sword at the original position of the cauldron, inserted into the hard stone base. It looked like stone yet not stone, like jade yet not jade. The form was simple and crude, but it had a sense of majesty. It was the Zhu Xian ancient sword. Ha! Right now, the thick black gas had once again enveloped Reverend Daoxian. In his wild laughter, he stretched out his hand, as if it had spirituality. Zhu Xian ancient sword shook, slowly pulled out by itself, flew off the ground and landed in Reverend Daoxian's hand. "Since you are so useless, then let me send you to see your teacher. Ha ha." Reverend Daoxian, in his ear-piercing savage laughter, tightly gripped the hilt of Zhu Xian ancient sword. Instantly, the entire huge altar shook, and abundant force exploded out. On the altar, the 7 huge stone pillars seemed to have received some summons. One by one lit up. The light became brighter and brighter, finally turned into 7 seven-colored rainbow lights, dazzling and dazzling, shot straight into the sky. The brilliant rainbow lights shot up into the sky, pierced into the dark purple clouds. Immediately, the thick clouds above the altar changed. Numerous clouds started to spin rapidly. Lightning flashed one after another in the clouds, slowly splitting open a huge crack, revealing the true face above the vault of heaven. Zhang Xiao Danan looked up, held his breath. Until now, he then truly understood why this place was called Illusory Moon Cave. High up in the vault of heaven, that crack opened by the rainbow light driven by Zhu Xian ancient sword, revealed a flickering and changing moon. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, all kinds of colors flickered on this illusory moon, emitting beautiful and mysterious light. And when Zhu Xian ancient sword drove the 7 huge pillars and shot into the sky, that 7-colored rainbow light instantly passed through the clouds and blended into the moon. Immediately, that moon's brilliance flourished. 7-colored light flickered incessantly. The next moment, It transformed into a seven-colored energy sword in the air. Where it passed, all of the dark clouds avoided and dissipated. It had an unparalleled might. Zhang Xiao Danan's face changed. He was too familiar with this formation. It was the invincible Zhu Xian sword formation. Just that right now, there were no small energy swords flying in the sky, but under the illumination of the moon, this main sword's might seemed to be even stronger than the Zhu Xian sword formation on the seven mountain peaks. Reverend Daoxian's face right now was completely shrouded in the black gas. A cold laughter was heard from within. It was bone-chilling. In this illusory moon cave, Zhu Xian ancient sword's power increased by 10 times. Even if you were to Luo Jin Xian, you will also die without a burial ground. Prepare to die. His words had just landed. The Zhu Xian ancient sword in his hand was already waved. Instantly the weather changed. Rumbling thunder exploded in heaven and earth. That terrible, huge sword in the firmament slowly turned its head, facing Zhang Xiao Danan. The sword had yet to land. The violent wind had already arrived. Zhang Xiao Danan knew that this kind of destructive and earth-shattering power was definitely not something human could withstand. His figure leaped and was about to dodge. Unexpectedly, the moon flashed in the sky. Just as he moved, the rainbow light had already shrouded down. Immediately, like Mount Tai pressing down, actually pressed his entire person back. And the pressure was so great that he could not stand stably. His entire body slowly knelt down. Where he stood, the ground rumbled, with Zhang Xiao Danan at the center, within a radius of several zhang. The ground in a blink of an eye cracked. The huge sword had yet to arrive, and its might was already so. After Zhu Xian ancient sword was broken under the moon, its power seemed to be even stronger than before. With this kind of terrifying power, even if a real Deluo Jin Xian was here, he would also turn into ashes. Just that, not knowing such formidable power, how could it exist in the world? Although Zhang Xiao Danan's current skills were extremely high, and after experiencing life and death enlightenment, his will reincarnated, his cultivation had advanced another level. But this Zhu Xian power was definitely not from the mortal world, not what a human could withstand. He was helpless, could only sigh lightly, wait for death. Just that at this life and death juncture, his heart was calm, without any fear. As if he was going home, his lips revealed a faint smile. But as if heaven's will did not want him to die like this, when Zhang Xiao Danan himself gave up, another voice was heard from afar. "Senior brother, please stop." This voice was young and calm, but in the voice, it gave one an indistinct feeling of excitement and exhilaration, as if the person who spoke casually could easily move one's heart, make one's blood boil. The Zhu Xian power that could destroy the heaven and earth, deities and demons were unable to stop, suddenly stopped. That Reverend Daoxian, who seemed to have the power to control the life and death of the heaven and earth, looked at everything disdainfully. The black gas on his face suddenly dispersed, revealing an incredulous expression, stared in shock behind ghostly. Even his voice became hoarse. "You, Wan Jr. brother." The pressure on Zhang Xiao Danan's body suddenly dispersed, following which the cracks under his feet also quietly closed up, as if it had never appeared. He had no time to be surprised, hurriedly turned and looked back. A white figure stood under the stone door that he had just entered this world from. That was a young and handsome youth, sword-like brows and starry eyes, a faint gentle smile on his face, but a pair of eyes seemed to be exuding a passionate passion. The strong wind blew past, his white clothes fluttered, indescribably suave. Just casually standing there, Zhang Xiao Danan suddenly felt a deep sense of respect, as if with just one word from him. Even if he followed him to roam the world, Iron Blood battlefield, he would also be willing. The horizon firmament, the illusory moon flickered. The once Qing Yun's two prides in this illusory time-space, in the disordered and lost memories, once again reunited. Reverend Daoxian's body slowly started to tremble. The Zhu Xian ancient sword that was held up high slowly drooped down. He step by step walked down the altar, walked towards that white figure, never looking at Zhang Xiao Danan again. White clothes fluttered. That handsome face, just like the passionate years in his memories, emitted a youthful radiance. That radiance, warm and blazing, once upon a time, it was the most cherished place in his heart. In his eyes, his dry eyes, hot tears slowly welled up. "Junior brother, is it really you?" That white-attired youth stood there, did not leave the boundary of the stone door. A smile on his face, said to Reverend Daoxian, "Senior brother, how are you? We haven't seen each other for a long time." Reverend Daoxian's body swayed. Although he was still holding the Zhuxian ancient sword, but the black gas on his body, after he saw Wan Jinni's figure, quickly dissipated, just that at the same time, that deep weariness that Zhang Xiao Danan had when he first saw him, again returned to his face. He seemed to, in this short period of time, aged 10 years, like the life in his body, was sucked away by the Zhuxian sword in his hand. Just that Reverend Daoxian obviously did not notice the changes in his body. All of his attention was placed on that mysterious white-attired youth. He slowly stretched out his hand to touch that body in his memory. "Junior brother," his voice was cut off halfway. His hand passed through that body, did not feel anything other than nothingness. Reverend Daoxian staggered, seemed to be unsteady. After supporting himself against the stone door, he barely managed to stand, his mouth panting heavily, but his eyes flashed with despair and pain. Like a flickering light and passing shadow, the white figure that had just disappeared because he had stretched out his hand to touch it, quietly appeared in front of him again. However, it still did not leave the range of that stone door. That young man's figure was still smiling and said, "Senior, why are you still not awake?" Reverend Daoxian looked up, his eyes bewildered, muttered, "Awake, what awake?" The white-attired youth stared at him, quietly said, "Senior brother, you have been intelligent your whole life. You should have long been enlightened. Let it go. Let go of this secular yearning. Let go of the useless pursuit of power. Both of us cultivated together. Don't tell me it is for these things." Reverend Daoxian's body slowly started to tremble. Right now he looked like an old man, at the last juncture of his life, struggling in confusion to see the road ahead clearly. "We cultivate Tao for what?" That white-attired youth again revealed that gentle smile. The expression on his face was so warm, even Zhang Xiao Danan, who was standing beside, trembled. That white-attired youth did not say anything, only lightly flicked his sleeve. A light breeze blew past his clothes. The fine sand under his feet were all blown away, leaving only emptiness. He calmly and quietly looked at Reverend Daoxian's weary old face, gently said, "Senior brother, let go." "Pa!" Zhuxian ancient sword. The Zhuxian ancient sword which contained supreme power, enough to destroy the heaven and exterminate the earth, fell from Reverend Daoxian's hand, like an ordinary mortal sword, like broken copper and iron, fell onto the ground. Reverend Daoxian's face slowly revealed a smile. That smile was peaceful and quiet, exactly the same as the white-attired youth's smile. "I am really silly. Actually waited for so long, only understood," he quietly said, took a step forward, stretched out both his hands, as if he wanted to hug something, but after a moment, his body slowly fell down, powerlessly fell onto the ground. All of the life from that body dissipated, but no matter what, it could not be taken away, that faint and gentle smile on Reverend Daoxian's face. Heaven and earth were silent. In that instant, only the sound of the distant whistling wind was left. The once all-powerful figure, right now quietly passed away. Zhang Xiao Danan quietly stood aside, watching everything that happened. The white-attired youth's figure became blurry, but did not dissipate. On the contrary, he silently looked at Reverend Daoxian's body. After a while, turned and looked at Zhang Xiao Danan. Zhang Xiao Danan more or less knew the identity of this white-attired figure. A sense of reverence involuntarily emerged in his heart. Quietly said, "Senior." That white-attired youth still had a gentle smile, looked at Zhang Xiao Danan with admiration, smiled and said, "Child, you are good, really very good." Chapter 496. Zhang Xiaofan for a moment did not understand why he praised himself. also did not know what the word good in his words referred to, unconsciously felt somewhat stunned. But that white-attired youth did not seem to intend to explain. His hand gently waved. The ancient Zhu Xian sword that was lying on the ground suddenly seemed to be supported by an invisible force, flew up. The white-attired youth stared at the ancient sword and then looked at Zhang Xiaofan, quietly said, "Child, this Zhu Xian power is a mystical supreme power that seizes heaven and earth creation, can kill celestials and exterminate demons, destroy heaven and earth. It should not exist in the mortal world, but since it is already here, it will eventually need a master." While speaking, Zhu Xian, ancient sword like a floating duckweed, carried by the wind, floated before Zhang Xiaofan. Zhang Xiaofan was stunned, looked at that white-attired youth, for a moment did not know what to say. After a long while said, "Senior," the white-attired youth smiled and said, "Why do you think you can come here? Actually, it is because this sword summoned you. So to say, you are the fated one." Zhang Xiaofan shook his head repeatedly, said, "Senior, you and Dao Xian. Sherbois, both of you are astonishing geniuses, matchless intelligence, one in a million, surpassing disciple by thousands and tens of thousands times. Both of you are unable to truly grasp this Zhu Xian power. Disciple is foolish. How can I bear this great responsibility?" The white-attired youth smiled and said, "Whether you can bear it or not, you will know when you pick up this Zhu Xian ancient sword. This Zhu Xian power is not an ordinary thing in the mortal world. Naturally, it is also not something that can be controlled by human skills." Zhang Xiaofan was stunned, looked at the white-attired youth, said, "Senior, what do you mean by this?" The white-attired youth smiled and said, "Since ancient times, to have the opportunity to comprehend 4 of the 5 Tianshu volumes, only you alone. If not so, out of the billions of living beings in the world, why is only you able to feel this Zhu Xian ancient sword summoning?" The more Zhang Xiaofan heard, the more shocked he became, cried out, "What? Don't tell me, Senior, you mean to say this Zhu Xian ancient sword is..." The white-attired youth smiled and nodded, cut in, "Exactly. Zhu Xian ancient sword is the legendary 5th volume Tianshu." At this point, his face suddenly darkened again, but very quickly he recovered his calmness and faintly said, "Moreover, the key to truly being able to control the power of Zhu Xian is not the level of one's cultivation. The most important is instead the heart." Zhang Xiaofan was puzzled, said, "Why is that?" The young man in white said, "The power of celestial execution is far beyond the ordinary. The controller can easily look down on the world, invincible. Once such a fearsome and terrifying power is in one's hands, one will often unknowingly indulge in it, and in the end, one will be devoured by the demons in one's heart and become the slave of the celestial execution." He sighed softly, said, "At that time me and Daoxian senior brother were confident that we were unparalleled in the world, supercilious. Little did we know that in the end, we still could not resist the demons in our hearts. Only those who have truly experienced thousands of tribulations, setbacks, and failures, a heart tempered into steel, can be the true master of this Zhu Xian power." Zhu Xian ancient sword slowly floated in front of Zhang Xiaofan. Far away, the white-attired youth's figure started to sway, gradually blurred, but his voice was still clearly heard. "Child, properly grasp this power. When you truly understand the meaning of that sentence in Tianshu, you will understand everything." The next moment, the white figure dissipated almost at the same time. Zhang Xiaofan solemnly and slowly stretched out his hand, grabbed the hilt of Zhu Xian ancient sword. 5 fingers closed. Rumble, like a lifetime of thunder, suddenly exploded beside his ears, tearing the entire firmament apart. Lightning rays scurried, the wind and clouds rolled. Above the firmament, the illusory moonlight flourished. 7 colors flashed incessantly, converged into a huge light pillar, descended from the sky, enveloping Zhang Xiaofan's figure within. A long howl, the sound went into the clouds. Zhang Xiaofan flew backwards, landed on that altar. The 7 colorful pillars lit up at the same time. The light pillar like a dragon, vigorous and vigorous, churning in the air, as if cheering wildly. In the depths of the light, Zhang Xiaofan's figure seemed to become blurry. His movements could be vaguely seen, slowly lifting up Zhu Xian Ancient's sword. As the ancient sword rose, the wind and clouds in the firmament rotated more and more rapidly. That colorful energy sword that represented the peerless Zhu Xian power once again appeared, looking disdainfully at the world, insufferably arrogant. Around that enormous sword in the sky, under the illumination of the illusory moonlight, in the empty void, a row of huge golden words slowly appeared. Each of them were hundreds of zhang in size, from the sky straight down to the ground. Extremely spectacular. Heaven and earth heartless, treating all living things as straw dogs. The wind and clouds surged, heaven and earth rustled. Deep within the light, that gaze stared deeply at the firmament. Qingyan Hill, Tong Tian Peak. Looking out from the top of Heaven's Bridge Peak, the sky in the distance was no longer as blue and empty as it used to be. At this moment, a violent blood-red light enveloped the horizon, turning into heavy dark clouds that pressed down on Heaven's Bridge Peak. Qing Yun's sect was in chaos. The evil faction's sudden invasion this time. Its ferocity was beyond anyone's expectations. In a short period of time, the good faction had already suffered heavy losses. 8 or 9 out of 10 of their elites were gone. The most terrifying thing was these 8 or 9 out of 10 good faction elites were actually bewitched by the evil faction Ghost King sect's unknown, mysterious evil magic, and instead became Ghost King's hired thugs, not recognizing even their own kin, turned back to massacre the good faction Taoist friends. The good faction's absolute advantage against the evil faction suddenly reversed, and Ghost King seemed to think this was not enough. Unleashed even more evil magic, actually bewitched all the commoners and residents who were heading towards Qingyun Road and Qingyun Hill mountain range, became his murderous weapons that only knew how to kill. The number of people had already exceeded 100,000. The might was so great, compared to the demon beast disaster that was known as the Heaven and Earth Calamity. It was even more powerful. And here at Qingyun sect, it was only Qingyun sect's own disciples and some of the good faction's remaining Taoist friends. The famous big sect's elites were all gone. Even for Tianyin Temple, this kind of influential family. Right now, only a few monks came over. Among them were Abbot Puhong Master, Pukong Divine Monk, and the younger generation Fa Xiang, Fashion, etc. In the crowd of monks, there was another withered old monk, silent, always standing beside Puhong Master. Hearing that the Tianyin Temple monks had arrived, there was a commotion in Qingyun sect. For so many years, Tianyin Temple had always been on good terms with Qingyun sect. Every time there was a disaster, they would stand side by side against the enemy. Immediately everyone came out to welcome them. Just that after seeing the Tianyin Temple monks, they couldn't help but be speechless. Lining up in front of the Qingyun sect people, other than Xiao Yikai, who was temporarily handling the affairs, it was Qingyun sect's current highest seniority, Return of the Wind Valley head, Zheng Shuchang, and Small Bamboo Valley head, Shuiwen Master. Zheng Shuchang looked over. Not only did the Tianyin Temple monks look travel-worn, but most of the monks had bloodstains on them. Evidently, before they came here, they had already gone through one or a few tough battles. And thinking about the number of Tianyin Temple monks, only these few came. Could it be? Shuchang stepped forward, hesitated for a moment, said, Puhong Master, you all is. Puhong Master was instead very calm, placed his palms together, and returned the greeting. Faintly said, this time the calamity has happened again. The world's living beings are in misery and suffering. Our temple monks initially wanted to save the common people. However, as the Tao rises 1 foot, the devil rises 10 zhang. Most of the disciples have already passed on. After speaking, he softly chanted, Amit Ba. Zheng Shuchang was speechless and then revealed a pained expression. Xiao Yikai forced himself to be calm. Although his heart slowly sank, but he still forced a smile and said, no matter what, it is good that all the masters are here. Please go in first. Puhong Master and the rest of the Tianyin Temple monks placed their palms together and returned the greeting. Immediately, everyone walked back to the crystal hall. Behind them, the blood-red clouds in the horizon pressed down a few more inches. Shueisha Master walked a few steps, suddenly sensed something, and turned back to look. Anan, who was following beside her, had walked to the railing beside the stone steps, leaning on the railing and gazing afar, in a daze, not knowing what she was thinking about. Shueisha Master was about to call her. Suddenly her expression darkened, as if she thought of something, quietly walked over and stood behind Anan, softly called Sweki. Anan's body moved, woke up with a start, turned back, and looked at Shueisha Master, quietly said, "Yes, teacher, disciple will go in now." After speaking, she turned and was about to walk towards the crystal hall. Who knew Shueisha Master's expression flashed past her face, stretched out her hand and grabbed Anan's hand, pulled her back. Anan was surprised, turned her head and said, "Teacher, what is it?" Shueisha Master softly sighed, looked around and saw there was no one around, lowered her voice, softly said, "Sweki, you can leave now." Anan was surprised, said, "Teacher, where are you asking disciple to go?" Shueisha Master turned to the distance, watched the ferocious red clouds rolling over, indifferently said, "Leave Qing Yun Hill. Go to the place you want to go. Be with the person you miss in your heart. Live a good life." She slowly turned and looked at Anan, said, "Don't come back again." Anan's face turned pale, tears suddenly flashed in her eyes, but after a moment, she eventually shook her head, quietly said, "Teacher, I will not go. I want to be with you." Shueisha Master gave a bitter laugh, said, "Silly child, teacher has lived for so long. Even if I die, it is nothing, but you are still so young, and also have a person whom you sincerely love. Listen to teacher. Leave Qing Yun and be with him." Lu Sweki clenched her teeth, her lips trembling, as if Shueisha Master's words to her was an irresistible temptation, engraved in her bones and heart. Wasn't it all for that kind of life? Just that, she eventually still slowly, like it was extremely difficult, but eventually still slowly shook her head, then turned and walked towards the crystal hall. Shueisha Master looked at her frail back, a long sigh, slowly shook her head, her expression sorrowful. Standing there for a moment, she softly sighed, also walked toward the crystal hall. Halfway, suddenly she stopped again, looked toward the other corner of the hall's railing, saw in that secluded place there was another man and woman quietly standing together, whispering, not knowing what they were talking about. And those two, the female was Shueisha Master's disciple one min. The male was Big Bamboo Valley Xavion. Looking at their expressions, there was a faint tenderness, not much fear of impending death. Instead, it seemed like they cherished the short time before them even more. At the very least, the expressions on their faces carried a faint and gentle smile. Shueisha Master's heart seemed to ache again, looked at those two for a long time, silently, slowly walked into the crystal hall. In the crystal hall, everyone had already taken their seats. Puhong Master was a person of virtue and prestige. Everyone pushed him to sit at the main seat, but Puhong Master insisted, and in the end still left the main seat empty. Everyone took their seats at the two sides. Zheng Shuchong coughed once, said, "Master, may I ask the vicinity of Tianyin Temple? Was it also attacked by the evil sect, evil people?" Puhong Master put his palms together, said, "Our Buddha is merciful and blessed. The evil claws for the time being have not harmed the common people near Tianyin Temple. Our temple's monks heard that the evil sect, evil people, are committing sins and killing again. In order to protect the common people of the world, we went to stop them. Unexpectedly this time, the evil sect, evil spells are so powerful, actually harmed so many of our disciples. That old monk's sin is very heavy." Qing Yun's sect disciples' faces revealed a pained expression. Xiao Yikai consoled, "Master, do not blame yourself. All the deceased senior brothers died a worthy death. They should all go to the Western Paradise. The urgent matter now is still to deal with the current crisis." Puhong Master sighed, nodded his head, and then revealed a hopeful expression, looked at the Qing Yun sect disciples, said, "The situation now is critical. The common people are in deep water and scorching fire. Looking at the world, only your esteemed sect, Daoxian Senior Brother, can use the Zhu Xian sword formation, display its divine might, can turn the situation around and save the common people. Please." After speaking, He put his palms together and bowed deeply. Who knew that once he said that, the Qingyun sect disciples looked at each other, all of them speechless, did not know what to say. Very quickly, Pu Hong Master realized the situation was not right. Asked in shock, "What is it?" Xiao Yikai laughed bitterly, said, "Master, you don't know. There's also an unforeseen event in our Qingyun sect. Teacher, he has already disappeared for many days." Tianyin temple monks stirred. Pu Hong Master was stunned, said, "How can it be like this?" Xiao Yikai revealed a helpless expression, said, "Now that things have come to this, I will not hide it from the masters. Ever since the evil beast calamity teacher used the Zhu Xian sword formation to repel the enemy, he became strange. His actions were different from usual. It is nothing to be strange, but teacher, he did some strange things and then disappeared. There was no news of him anymore." Pu Hong Master was speechless, stunned speechless. Reverend Daoxian's cultivation was remarkable. The whole world looked askance at him. How could he become like this? It was really unimaginable. But Xiao Yikai and the rest were obviously not lying. Looking at their awkward expressions, the strange things that they mentioned were not something that could be easily tolerated, but the most important thing was, after Reverend Daoxian disappeared, what should they do? Pu Hong Master's expression suddenly changed, looked up at the Qingyun sect people, and said, "Then, I wonder if the Zhu Xian ancient sword is still there. In your esteemed sect, is there another virtuous master who can activate this Zhu Xian sword formation?" This time, Xiao Yikai did not speak. It was Zheng Shuchong who sighed, said, "Master, you don't know. The Zhu Xian ancient sword has always been kept by our Qingyun sect head Reverend alone, passed down from generation to generation. Outsiders cannot come into contact with it. Now the Zhu Xian ancient sword has also disappeared along with Reverend Daoxian's senior brother. Other than activating the Zhu Xian sword formation requires Tai Ching's supernatural powers. Only exceptional talents are able to cultivate it. In our sect these 100 over years, only Reverend Daoxian's senior brother alone can cultivate to this level. We are ashamed. We have the heart, but we are powerless." Pu Hong Master's last glimmer of hope was dashed. He was stunned for a long while, quietly said, "If it is really so, isn't the defeat already set in stone? The common people are really facing a great calamity." Qingyun sect people were silent. Each and every one of their faces solemn, lowered their heads. Inside the crystal hall, the atmosphere for a moment was extremely heavy. Who knew at this moment? Suddenly a cry of despair was heard from afar, followed by a wave of ferocious roars and roars, like thousands of wild beasts rumbling over. A Qingyun disciple with a look of despair stumbled into the crystal hall, his voice trembling as he shouted, "Evil, evil sect, evil people have killed their way up the mountain." Everyone instantly stood up at the same time. Each and every one of their faces revealed shock and disbelief. Slowly, a feeling of despair pervaded this imposing crystal hall. Could it be there really was no hope? Everything would perish like this? Behind the crowd, Lu Sueki quietly turned around, gazed into the distance. There was no fear on her face, only a faint, gentle longing. Chapter 497. The blood-red light blotted out the sky and drifted over. Looking from Tongtian Peak, the entire sky had turned blood-red. Dark red clouds rolled and rolled, making people feel suffocated just by looking at it. Under this stretch of red clouds, everything was dyed red. The sky was red, the mountains were red, the clouds floating above the sea of clouds were red, the water droplets flowing down from the rainbow bridge were red, even the biting cold mountain breeze that blew past seemed to be red. The thick smell of blood blew over from the wind, pervading above Tongtian Peak. Innumerable figures were climbing up from all directions below Tongtian Peak, so densely packed that there were almost no gaps. There were human figures everywhere. Everyone's eyes were glinting with a strange red light. Looking at this already crazy crowd, most of them from their clothes seemed to be ordinary people living at the foot of Qingyun Hill. But how could ordinary people move so vigorously and climb like apes and monkeys? The strangeness of this naturally was in that strange blood-red light that took away their minds. Without any effort, they could have an innumerable army, and even if they were bewitched ordinary people, through the four divinities' blood formation, it could also stimulate their life potential by 10 times. Calculating like this, the evil sect Ghost King really could not find any way to deal with it. A crazy ordinary people, anyone in Qing Yun's sect could disregard it, but what about 100 or 1,000? Moreover, there were 100,000 of them, covering the entire mountain like a swarm of crazy ants. Charging up, it made one's heart feel cold. In that innumerable frenzied crowd, there were quite a number of people who appeared especially lively under the illumination of the blood-red rays in the sky. Their skills clearly far surpassed those commoners who were like ants around them, flying and riding on swords, whatever the cultivators could do, and their skills were extremely high. Many of them had already surpassed the Qing Yun sect disciples who were guarding the place. These people were naturally the good faction true cultivators whose mind were taken away by Ghost King in the previous few battles. With the help of so many skilled fighters, in addition to the almost endless frenzied flow of people, the evil faction's attack was like a huge wave beating the shore, unstoppable, under the illumination of the red light. The Qing Yun sect disciples defending above the sea of clouds almost did not have any decent resistance, and had already retreated to the Rainbow Bridge. Not long after, sounds of whooshing were heard incessantly. The evil faction army from all directions had already occupied the vast and spacious cloud platform. Looking at it, the fairyland that was originally misty was now filled with people. Roars and screams rose and fell one after another, just like the hell of evil spirits. In the end, more and more people squeezed in here. There was simply no place to stand. In the sky, a ball of red light that was 100 times darker than the red shadow in the sky and looked like a blood ball slowly flew to the sky above the platform. A burst of wild laughter came from it. "Aha, Jadian's trash. Now you finally know how powerful I am. Ha ha, where's Dao Xian? Dao Xian, you dog. Why haven't you come out yet? Didn't you always want to save the world? Isn't the celestial execution sword formation invincible? Why are you a coward now, not daring to come out? Ha ha ha." The laughter was unbridled and savage, almost hysterical, but the ruthlessness in it made the entire Qing Yun Hill Tongtian Peak shrouded in a hopeless atmosphere. But it was also at this moment the evil faction army's attack temporarily halted. There was no other reason, but the good faction people on Tongtian Peak made use of the geographical advantage and defended the Rainbow Bridge with all their might. The Rainbow Bridge was a spectacle made by heaven and earth, but now it became an insurmountable natural moat for the evil faction army. The huge bridge was usually considered wide, but right now, to the 100,000 evil faction army, it was no different than a single plank bridge. Those crazy and irrational people rushed onto the bridge, but after a moment, only screams of could be heard from time to time. But some people could not stop their feet, or because they were too crowded, they were pushed down the bottomless abyss under the Rainbow Bridge, quickly turning into black dots and being swallowed by the deep sea of clouds. And on the good faction side, they were initially caught unprepared by the evil faction army's surprise attack, and in addition the disparity in strength was too great. That was why they collapsed in a blink of an eye above the sea of clouds. But right now the elites who were originally gathered at Crystal Hall all joined the battle. Their combat powers surged. Just looking at the Rainbow Bridge here, the magnificent lights from the magical weapons, it was already many times stronger than before. Although the evil faction had a large number of people, but those who could fight face-to-face were only a few dozens of people, and the majority of the evil faction army came, because Ghost King used the four divinities' blood formation's demonic power to bewitch their minds. Although the four divinities' blood formation could stimulate their potential and become extremely powerful, able to climb like flying, but it ultimately could not allow them to instantly learn all kinds of celestial skills to fly on their swords. Therefore, although the evil faction's momentum was strong, most of them could only foolishly stand on the ground and rush forward. When they encountered the Rainbow Bridge on Tongtian Peak, this kind of natural moat, they could only cry out in vain. Although among the crowd, there were still quite a number of cultivators who had lost their minds and could fly on their swords to fight in the air, but they were after all only a minority. On the good faction side, one side sent more men to defend the Rainbow Bridge bridgehead, and at the same time, dispatched their highly skilled fighters to deal with those few evil faction highly skilled fighters who were leaping over. Using numbers against few, they were suppressed in a blink of an eye. In this way, the good faction side actually slowly stabilized their footing and turned the situation around. On the other hand, on the evil faction side, numerous people with red glints in their eyes bare their fangs and brandish their claws, but could only squeeze on the small but long rainbow bridge, unable to advance, unable to retreat. After a while, the commotion became more and more severe, and there were more and more people who fell off the rainbow bridge and lost their lives. Looking at the black figures who fell one after another, it seemed to be even more than the number of people killed by the good faction. This scene was out of the evil faction's expectation, while the good faction's morale was greatly boosted, although the situation was still not optimistic. But after all, it was much better than the sudden battle just now where they were defeated like a mountain collapsing. Just that, this little bit of hope did not last long in the good faction people's hearts. After the evil faction army was blocked at one end of the rainbow bridge, that strange, enormous blood ball in the horizon slowly crossed the cloud sea platform and flew to the top of the rainbow bridge. The crimson-red light swallowed and stretched, like a terrible demon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws in the air. The surging blood air was spinning rapidly. The next moment, from the enormous blood ball, suddenly towards the good faction people at the other end of the rainbow bridge on Tongtian Peak, shot down several blood-colored light pillars. Tian Temple, Puhong Master, and the rest had already fought with the evil faction before. Therefore, when they saw that enormous blood ball flying up, their expressions were already grave. This time, when they saw that strange light pillar shining down, Puhong Master's expression changed even more. He quickly shouted, "Quickly, get out of the way! That light pillar is what the evil person uses to bewitch people's minds." Everyone's countenance changed when they heard it, dodged frantically, but the good faction people were densely guarding the Rainbow Bridge bridgehead to defend against the evil faction attack. The speed of the light pillar shooting down from the sky was also very fast. In a short period of time, how could they completely dodge? Only a few cries were heard. There were already a few good faction disciples who could not dodge in time and were enveloped by the blood-colored light pillar. Immediately, those few people's bodies shook greatly, and then their faces distorted. Their movements became slow and stiff. Red light slowly emitted from their eyes. The people beside still did not understand the situation. Some of them were their sect friends, in a moment of desperation, disregarded everything and dashed forward, wanting to pull the victims out of that light pillar, who knew that the people under the light instantly turned hostile, mercilessly backhanded. One by one, they wielded sharp weapons and started to hack at the people around them, among those who dashed forward to save them. A few instead died under their good friends' hands, without knowing why. Cries of misery, cries of alarm immediately rose and fell. Puhong Master's face was ashen, clenched his teeth, disregarding the Buddhist precepts, loudly shouted, "Kill these friends who have been bewitched." After speaking, a pained expression flashed past his face, just that now was definitely not the time to repent. Qing Yun's sect, Reverend Daoxian, was not here. The good faction people present all chose Puhong Master, who was of virtue and prestige. He also understood that right now the situation was already extremely bad. Every minute he could hold on was a minute. Immediately he did not decline modestly, stood out and loudly commanded. Under his command, the good faction people one after another caught up. Finally, those bewitched people were eliminated, considered to have temporarily stabilized the situation. Just that a haze had completely shrouded the hearts of all the good faction people present. Not long ago, these people were still their comrades who fought shoulder to shoulder with them. In a blink of an eye, they could only kill each other. Then who would be the next? Or, it should be said, what if after they were bewitched? As if they were stimulated by something, the evil faction army that was crowding on the Rainbow Bridge all started to shout wildly, extremely excited, and taking advantage of the little chaos among the good faction people, a small batch of evil faction minions actually charged down the Rainbow Bridge. Puhong Master quickly ordered to encircle and annihilate these evil faction minions, although were mortals, but right now, after demonization, most of them had extraordinary strength, and their bodies were also much tougher. When the ordinary Qing Yun sect disciples used their magical weapons and celestial sword to hack at them, many times they could not kill them immediately and were held back by them for a moment. And also taking advantage of this short interval, the blood ball whistled in the sky. In a blink, several more light pillars shot down, red glints, extremely strange. Immediately, the good faction people started to evade. No one wanted to become those living corpses in front of them. This time, although Puhong Master tried his best to command, but the good faction people were already in chaos. The evil faction army on the Rainbow Bridge howled repeatedly. The pressure was increasing. The remaining good faction people who were struggling to hold on finally could not hold on anymore. A series of sounds were heard. A few bodies were sent flying. They were the good faction disciples who were guarding the Rainbow Bridge. In an instant, as if a huge dam had collapsed, the berserk tide of people rushed down with a loud rumble. In the midst of fierce roars and roars, countless of evil faction minions swarmed up. Immediately, the good faction people were scattered and scattered. The entire line of defense had been completely broken. Hell on earth seemed to be right before their eyes. In everyone's hearts, there was only one word: despair. In the endless frenzied crowd, most of the good faction were separated. Often one person had to face several terrifying and fearless enemies. Everyone was courageously killing the enemy, because if they did not kill the enemy, they would be chopped into minced meat. Red clouds flickered in the sky. Blood steamed. That arrogant laughter seemed to be louder and louder, filled with satisfaction. Lu Sweki was also fighting in the crowd, Tianya's celestial sword flickering with light blue light, dancing up and down beside her. Each cold light swept past. An enemy would howl and lose their life. Just one enemy fell. In a blink there would be 2, 3, or even 4, 5 people pouncing over. Her white clothes right now had been dyed red by blood. Gradually, her movements became slower and slower, and her arms seemed to become heavier and heavier. The screams of despair that constantly burst out from around her had already begun to numb her ears. She had long forgotten how many lives she had taken under her sword, and was only relying on her instincts to protect herself with all her might. More and more evil faction minions, twisted faces and crazed eyes, pounced over. She clenched her teeth, waved her sword horizontally, forcing back the 3 evil faction minions in front of her, was about to parry a saber coming from the left, when suddenly her legs gave way. Her body was devoid of strength and slumped down. Lu Sweki was shocked, used her remaining strength to dodge to the side, but instantly she saw stars, a wave of dizziness. The next moment, a sharp pain came from her left shoulder, blood splattered. This pain instead stimulated the remaining strength in her body. Gritting her teeth, Lu Sweki flipped her sword, Tianya, celestial sword like a hot knife through butter. Immediately the enemy fell to the ground, but at the same time, several terrifying figures around her had already pounced over. A wave of despair swept past Lu Sweki's heart. Just that at this moment, there was no fear on her face. Under the overwhelming blood-red light, she gently sighed, as if resigned to her fate, closed her eyes. With a turn of her hand, Tianya's celestial sword shone brightly. She quietly called out, "Shao Fan." In the faint voice, Tianya's celestial sword slashed towards her fair neck. Lu Sweki was about to perish. At the critical moment, suddenly a gust of wind whistled. A strong force rushed to her side from behind, grabbed Lu Sweki's arm, narrowly stopping Tianya's celestial sword 3 inches away from Lu Sweki's neck. At the same time, a gust of wind blew up. The person using an invisible force sent those evil faction minions flying. Lu Sweki was shocked, opened her eyes, and saw that the one who saved her was her teacher, Shui Wei. Shui Wei Master's face did not look too good. Obviously, she had expended a lot of energy. Even her body also had several wounds. Lu Sweki called out, "Teacher," and could not continue. Chapter 498. Although Shui Wei Master had forced back the surrounding enemies, but her face was ashen, looked to be panting, but her eyes were still determined, loudly said to Lu Sweki, Sweki, live on. Remember teacher's words. Live on well. Before she could finish, suddenly Shuwa Master's body shook greatly. Her face instantly drained of blood. Lu Sweki turned pale with fright, exclaimed, Teacher, what happened to you? Her voice suddenly turned hoarse. A sharp long blade, carrying traces of blood, came out from Shuwa Master's chest. Shuwa Master's body swayed. Suddenly, with an angry shout, abruptly turned and slapped. Immediately the person who attacked her from behind was struck several zhongs away, blood spurting wildly. It looked like she would not be able to survive. And that person was also valiant. Although she lost her life, but her body flew out, her hand still tightly holding onto the long blade, blood splattered. The blade left her body. Shuiwe Master groaned in pain. Her body spun 2 rounds on the spot. Finally, unable to hold on, fell down. Lu Sweki's mind instantly went blank. Strength gushed out from her body. Tianya's celestial sword glowed brightly, like an angry phoenix soaring to the sky. Immediately within a radius of 1 zhongs, the evil faction minions were all forced back, flesh and blood splattered, not knowing how many people could not avoid in time and died under Tianya. After forcing back the evil sect minions, she staggered to Master Shiyue's side and hugged Master Shiyue. With tears in her eyes, she cried, Teacher, teacher, what happened to you? Don't go. The wound on Shua Master's chest was too deep, blood spurting out like a fountain. At one glance, it was already hopeless. Even the light in her eyes was quickly dispersing, just that she seemed to still hear her beloved disciples' cries. Her pale face revealed the last trace of a smile. Looked at Lu Sweki, stuttered, Sweki, remember, live on well. Go. The word go was barely spat out, Master. Shuiwe seemed to have lost all her strength. Her body shook slightly and then softened. Her eyes also slowly closed. Lu Sweki, like being struck by 5 thunders, her entire body swayed, but the surrounding evil sect people would not give her time. Taking advantage of this moment, another large group of enemies pounced over. Lu Sweki's face was pale, like she still could not accept the fact that her teacher had passed away in front of her, or like she had lost her will to live, numbly had no intention to resist. But a figure suddenly dashed past her, pulled her away from danger. Lu Sweki's body shook. Turned to look, it was her senior sister Wenmin, who was also stained with blood. Lu Sweki's heart ached, choking with sobs. Senior sister, Master, Wenmin's eyes were also brimming with tears, but she still clenched her teeth, forced the enemy in front of her to retreat, clutched Lu Sweki's hand tightly, loudly shouted, Junior sister, listen to teacher, we must live on well. Lu Sweki's body shook, turned back to look at that figure who had already lost his life in the evil sect crowd. Like 2 balls of fire suddenly burning in her eyes, clenched her teeth, finally again brandished Tinya, celestial sword, back to back with Wenmin, using every bit of strength in her body, fought with all her might, persevered for every bit of hope to live on, bitterly held on. Blood-red light still surged over like it covered the sky and covered the earth. Not a trace of sunlight could be seen. The violent battlefield had already turned into hell on earth. More and more good faction people were dying. And at this moment, suddenly a long howl was heard from the Jade cold pool beside the Rainbow Bridge. Water ripples burst. An enormous spiritual beast leapt out with a loud bang. It was Qin Yin Sect's mountain guardian spiritual beast, Water Unicorn. Almost without any hesitation, Water Unicorn had already bared its fangs and brandished its claws, dashed into the evil sect densely packed crowd. Its sharp claws danced, its huge mouth crazily biting. This immediately threw the evil sect's formation into chaos. Such an enormous creature, even the most ferocious people would instinctively feel fear. One after another ran away. Water Unicorn's sudden appearance gave the good faction people who were almost completely annihilated a chance to catch their breath. Many of the evil sect minions all turned back and charged towards that enormous beast. Many of the good faction people who were almost unable to withstand the heavy pressure luckily escaped the calamity. That Water Unicorn dashed left and right among the evil sect people, sweeping everything before it, Desperate cries rose and fell. For a moment, the limelight was unrivaled. The good faction people all took this opportunity to retreat up the stone steps of Crystal Hall. Lu Sweki and Wen Min were also almost completely exhausted. Wen Min's skills were still a notch lower than Lu Sweki. The enemies in front of her temporarily retreated. Without that murderous energy, she almost could not even walk up the stone steps. Lu Sweki was not much better than Wen Min, but after all, the two senior sisters still supported each other and barely managed to walk up Crystal Hall. Just that looking around, both of them could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. The good faction people standing in front of Crystal Hall, at a glance, there were not even 100 of them, and all of them were injured, stained with blood. Both of them looked at each other, saw the despair in each other's eyes. Even though the water unicorn was valiant, but under the evil sect, evil spells, how could it last long? As expected, although the water unicorn was invincible at the beginning and attracted the evil sect army's attention, but as the surrounding pressure increased, although the water unicorn's roars were deafening, but it gradually showed signs of weakness, especially those cultivators who appeared from time to time in the crowd using their weapons to attack. It was especially harmful to the water unicorn. In addition to the evil sect army that was swarming over like an endless number of ants. Less than an hour later, the water unicorn finally showed fear. Its body riddled with injuries. Suddenly, its giant head shook, made an earth-shattering roar, turned back and charged out a bloody path. Once again, jumped back in a jade cold pool, dived into the deep waters, and did not show up again. Although most of the good faction people in the Crystal Hall had already seen the outcome of the battle, but when the water unicorn was defeated and escaped, everyone's face still revealed a pained expression. Looking at that black mass of evil faction minions once again turning towards here, a sense of despair pervaded the crowd. Anan struggled to stand up, gently raised the Tianya, celestial sword, placed it beside her neck. When Min was shocked, wanted to stop her, but Anan had already softly said, "Senior sister, forget it. It is already impossible. I would rather commit suicide than let those people's dirty hands kill me." Tears welled up in Wen Min's eyes. Suddenly footsteps were heard behind her. She turned back and looked. Her body trembled. It was Big Bamboo Valley Xavion covered in blood, silently standing behind her. Wen Min looked deeply at Xavion. Xavion smiled, stretched out his hand to hold her fair hand, held it tightly in his hand. Wen Min seemed to have suddenly gained courage. There was no longer fear and despair on her face, slowly revealed a gentle smile. She turned back, spoke to Anan softly. "Junior sister, rest in peace. We will be accompanying you soon." Lu Sweki looked at their tightly clasped hands and their figures leaning against each other, and a smile slowly appeared on her face. Then she closed her eyes and gently called out in her heart, "Xiao Fan, let's meet again in the next life." Tanya's celestial sword's icy cold air seemed to penetrate through the skin and into the blood vessels. She smiled. Her hand suddenly grasped the sword hilt. Suddenly at this moment, Wen Min suddenly cried out, "Junior sister, wait." Anan was stunned, put down Tianya, asked in astonishment, "What?" Wen Min turned around, looked at the back of Tong Tian Peak, said in astonishment, you listen, what is that sound?" The originally violent and noisy battlefield, for some reason, suddenly became quiet, not a single sound. Those evil sect army baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, each and every one of them were stunned. In the silent tranquility, the ancient Tongtian Peak, the entire mountain range, actually slowly started to tremble. A deep, long whistle burst out from the back of Tongtian Peak, gradually increased in pitch, turned impassioned and clear, the sound splitting metal and stone straight into the clouds. In the whistle, an enormous grand light charged up to the sky, like a huge dragon that had been imprisoned for thousands and thousands of years, leapt out with a loud bang. Galloping across the 9 heavens, calling the wind and summoning the rain, the gale howled. Heaven and earth changed color, the mountains all bowed their heads. The magical weapons in the hands of countless people all started to tremble on their own. Zhu Xian, that is Zhu Xian. Suddenly, a burst of ecstatic shouts sounded in front of Crystal Hall. among the remaining Qing Yun sect disciples. Even those who were seriously injured seemed to have completely forgotten the pain. One by one struggled to stand up and look, that resplendent and spectacular light pillar, piercing through the heaven and earth, insufferably arrogant, as if it was their incomparable pride and hope. Zhu Xian. The firmament, which was covered by the blood-red light, was immediately forced away by this sudden brilliance. The resplendent light soared below the 9 heavens, flew over, above Tongtian Peak, suddenly burst out, radiating thousands of zhong of light, like a blazing sun descending into the mortal world, driving away all the darkness. In the depths of the light, a figure slowly appeared. However, the light was too brilliant, and no one could see his face clearly. Only when the light flickered did people clearly see that the figure slowly raised an ancient sword in his hand. Zhu Xian, ancient sword. In an instant, the crystal hall erupted in a burst of deafening cheers. One Min and Song Darren's eyes were brimming with tears. Only Lu Sueki. Suddenly her body swayed, her face revealing a look of disbelief. Just that right now, everyone was looking at the horizon. No one noticed her unusual expression. That figure in the horizon, although faintly discernible in the light, but that silhouette had long been deeply engraved in her heart. Even if she died, she would not forget it. How could she not recognize it? Xiao Fan. She called out thousands of times in her heart, using her hands to tightly grip her clothes, as if only by doing so could she suppress her wildly beating heart. At the same time, the strange blood ball in the evil sect's horizon had obviously long detected this mysterious visitor, rumbled and turned over. Both sides were shrouded in brilliance, one white, one red, indistinctly showing a confrontation. After a moment, suddenly a furious voice was heard from the blood ball. So it is you. Facing Ghost King's question, that figure in the brilliance did not reply. He only raised the Zhu Xian ancient sword in his hand. Instantly, a strange whistle was heard. Under the vast firmament, Qing Yun mountain range's 7 peaks abruptly shot out 7 colorful light pillars, charged up to the sky, like a dragon traversing the sky, streaked across the horizon, and finally converged on that Zhu Xian ancient sword. The strange whistle became louder and louder, filling heaven and earth with this sound. After a moment, as if the past appeared again, under the firmament, that enormous colorful sword appeared, the Zhu Xian sword formation that was once circulated in countless people's hearts, finally once again appeared in the mortal world. Go and die. In the angry shout, that strange blood ball in the sky also changed. The blood energy rolled and retreated to both sides, revealing the true face within. Everyone looked over. Even with their vast knowledge, they could not help but be dumbstruck, sucked in a breath of cold air. In the middle of the blood ball, shrouded by the enormous blood energy, was the hidden dragon cauldron, which had completely turned into blood red. But the strangest thing was, Ghost King's body had already mostly melted into this hidden dragon cauldron, leaving only his chest and head above the ancient cauldron. His face twisted savagely, staring ferociously at that resplendent light figure opposite. With a wave of his hand, it was as if a tremendous force was pulling. The countless blood energies in half of the sky were all rolled up with a rumble. The momentum was incomparable. The blood-red clouds that were like huge waves in Ghost King's hand actually transformed into a huge red spear that spanned across the sky. The blazing electric rays were hissing and scurrying on it. It was extremely terrifying. "Watch me tear you to pieces, bastard!" A heart-wrenching and lung-splitting roar. Ghost King seemed to have completely lost his mind, only left with the thirst to kill. The enormous red spear with a rumble crashed towards the Zhu Xian light. On Tongtian Peak, even though they had unparalleled confidence in the Zhu Xian sword formation, but witnessing Ghost King's unparalleled evil might, everyone's countenance still changed. Speechless, Lu Sueki's face even paler, staring intently at the horizon. The Zhu Xian sword formation that appeared this time was different from the Zhu Xian sword formation that Reverend Daoxian used the previous 2 times in the horizon, other than that insufferably arrogant, disdainful, huge, colorful sword. The original thousands of changes covering the sky and earth did not appear. However, for some reason, although there was only one energy sword, but the brilliant power that emanated from the Zhu Xian sword formation was not inferior to the past. The colorful, huge sword above the light, a small movement, seemed to have indistinctly the power to tear the firmament, to pull the stars. Looking at that enormous red spear breaking through the sky, unstoppable, someone in the crowd had already exclaimed, but that figure in the light did not even have the intention to dodge. On the contrary, he faced that enormous red spear, abruptly wielded the sword with both hands, and swung forward. Immediately, thunder exploded in the horizon, rumbling under the clear sky. Zhu Xian's sword turned with a rumble, slashed towards that enormous red spear. Chapter 499. Two terrifying gigantic weapons in the firmament collided with a loud bang, instantly bursting out a scorching flash that was 1,000 times hotter than the sun. No one could open their eyes, only heard the deafening sound. The earth quaked and the mountains shook. The entire Qingyun Mountains seemed to be unable to withstand the might of heaven and earth, fearfully wanted to lower their heads. The splendors slightly dispersed. Everyone impatiently looked up at the sky, saw that intense sky battlefield. A gigantic vortex appeared, the deep black like an invincible abyss, coldly staring at the mortal world. Under the vortex, the colorful Zhu Xian huge sword's colors all faded, transforming into a scorching, dazzling white sword, piercing through the firmament, bringing with it an earth-shattering grandeur as it slashed down. The red gigantic spear broke with a sound. A terrifying scream came from the mouth of the Ghost King who had fused with the hidden dragon cauldron. He was filled with disbelief and despair. Even his eyes were bleeding. He roared, "This is impossible, this is impossible. I have the power of Shura. I have the power of Shura." His last words were drowned out by the raging wind. Zhu Xian's sword split the gigantic blood spear, but did not retreat. Instead, used the momentum to charge over. In that instant, the entire firmament was enveloped by the radiance of Zhu Xian's ancient sword. The clouds in the horizon rolled, as if the deities and demons in the heavens and earth right now were trembling in fear. That terrifying Zhu Xian power, that sword, pierced straight towards the hidden dragon cauldron, pierced straight towards Ghost King, pierced straight into the depths of the red ball of evil. The scorching light burned everything, swept up and shredded all the blood rays in the horizon. Wind, clouds, thunder, and lightning roared incessantly. Countless remnant clouds were swept up, swallowed into that unfathomable black vortex in the firmament. Ghost King's face revealed despair, but in that despair revealed madness. He laughed wildly, shouted wildly, waved both his hands, suddenly piercing into the eyes of that evil face on the hidden dragon cauldron. Rumble, an angry thunder, in that instant suppressed all the sounds in the firmament. Ghost King's eyes suddenly spurted out 2 streams of blood. Even though he was heavily injured, he was still laughing maniacally. And on the hidden dragon cauldron, as if the last of its divine might was activated, a terrifying blood-colored figure, as tall as 10,000 zhong, slowly formed behind Ghost King. Die! The crazy roar resounded through the horizon. That strange blood demonic figure moved with a loud rumble, bringing with it a terrifying, imposing manner, affected the blood chi in the sky, once again pounced towards the Zhu Xian light. And the blazing white light sword that the Zhu Xian ancient sword transformed into, in the next moment, stabbed into the hidden dragon cauldron. In the terrifying roar with a heart-wrenching pain, a dazzling brilliance burst forth behind. A figure was forced out of the hidden dragon cauldron by the Zhu Xian ancient sword, as if it had lost all of its strength, flew out far away, disappeared into the distant horizon, no longer visible. And at this time, that terrible blood specter had already pounced in front of the human figure in the light, losing the protection of the Zhu Xian ancient sword. The human figure now looked like in front of the terrible power of the blood specter's 10,000 zhong body, as if extremely weak. Ho ho! in the wild roar. That figure in the light was grabbed by the blood specter, but in the next moment, the light dispersed. The human figure was also immediately engulfed by the blood specter. The people on Tongtian Peak turned pale with fright, screamed repeatedly. Lu Sueki's body shook greatly. Her face turned pale. With a wah, she spat out a mouthful of blood, her body swaying. Suddenly, that blood specter who was laughing maniacally at the sight of victory, its huge body suddenly stiffened. The Zhu Xian huge sword that flew back, flickering with the blazing Zhu Xian power, stabbed into his chest from behind. Around the Zhu Xian ancient sword, the surging blood qi immediately dispersed. The huge body revealed a terrible wound, rapidly expanding. That blood specter made an earth-shattering roar. The moment before its body was about to shatter, it suddenly threw the frail human figure in its hand into the horizon. The terrible and deep whirlpool, instantly engulfed by a ball of lightning, disappeared without a trace. Following which, the blood specter made a final roar, finally unable to withstand the terrible Zhu Xian power's erosion in its chest. Under the blazing white light, in the roar, it vanished into thin air. In the horizon, the red clouds gradually receded, the wind and clouds calmed down, losing the control of the bloodlight. Those numerous evil sect minions like having a nightmare. The red light in their eyes dissipated, slowly regained consciousness. Here at the good faction, everyone looked at each other. After the nightmare, there seemed to be an illusion of disbelief. One? Everyone asked each other, tears brimming in their eyes, as if they could not believe everything in front of them. Wenmin and Xavion hugged each other tightly, not willing to separate for a moment. After a long while, Wenmin then recalled something, with tears but with a smile. She turned to look at Lu Sueki. With a bitter smile, she called out, junior sister, look at us." Her voice suddenly stopped. Behind her, Lu Sueki's entire body collapsed. As if there was no longer any vitality, she fainted. Just that this little sorrow was soon drowned out by the wave-like cheers that erupted from Tongtian Peak. The vortex in the horizon slowly disappeared. The warm sunlight once again shone on the world, bringing the long-awaited peace and warmth. Epilogue Grand Finale. White clouds leisurely drifted above the mountains. A light breeze blew, an indescribable leisurely and comfortable feeling. At the place where majestic Fox Mountain used to be, that huge abyss no longer had the glaring red light, but from the depths of the abyss, there was still a trace of hot air coming from time to time. Indistinctly heard the sound of lava flowing. In front of the abyss, a man's figure sat alone. His eyes were tightly closed, but he looked blind. His appearance was old, and his figure was haggard. From time to time, he would say something in a low voice. After a long time, he slowly collapsed, lying on the ground. A solid feeling came from the rough ground. The corners of his mouth slowly revealed a trace of smile. His mouth softly called out. The voice drifted out. There was no reply. He gently panted for a while, slowly stopped breathing. And after a long time, a figure walked over from afar. It was a lady with a black veil over her face, her figure graceful. It was Yuji, who had been missing for a long time. She saw a figure lying beside the abyss. Her body shook and immediately rushed over, but in the end it was too late. Supporting the man's body, her eyes slightly red, behind the veil, her soft choked sobs were heard. And at this moment, suddenly in the abyss behind her, in that deep darkness, a clear bell sound reverberated. Yuji's body shook greatly, as if she could not believe her own ears. Abruptly turned and looked into the abyss, but other than the deep darkness, she could not see anything. The bell sound was clear, melodious, and drifting, reverberated out from the abyss, blended into the mountain breeze, at the foot of Qingyun Hill, outside Heiyang City. A group of people slowly walked along the wild, ancient path. Xiao Huan, who was full of smiles, suddenly turned around. Her face like a flower, smiled and asked the person behind her, "Pinger sister, is what you said for real? From now on you will really put down everything and follow us to roam the world?" Jean Pinger, dressed in light yellow clothes, extremely charming and radiant, smiled sweetly. hugged Xiao Huan's shoulder, smiled, and said, "Of course. There are too many dangers in this world, countless stinky men. There are already two who are by your side day and night. If I do not look after you, I really will not be at ease." Xiao Huan giggled. Both of them walked side by side. A grumbling voice was heard from behind. Angrily said, "What stinky men! Old man's nature is kind. Everyone knows, isn't it, Wild Dog?" Wild Dog Taoist walked past Zhou Yixian, who was chattering incessantly, laughed, and did not reply. Instead, hastened his footsteps and chased after the two graceful figures. Tanis Ka spat a few times, shook his head and sighed. Public morals are deteriorating day by day. Public morals are deteriorating day by day. While speaking, he seemed to have thought of something, turned his head and gazed afar. That lofty and towering Qing Yun mountain range pierced through the clouds, imposing and majestic. A trace of smile slowly appeared at the corner of his mouth. A faint light of wisdom flashed in his eyes. "Grandpa, let's go quickly." Behind him, Xiao Huan's shout was heard. Tanis Ka laughed, turned around, waved the bamboo pole of Immortal Guide, laughed loudly, and said, "Come, come, I knew that without Old Man this pillar. You guys can't leave, right, huh? Hey, you guys walk slower. Can't you see Old Man's legs are slow? Hey, time passed, not knowing how much time had passed in a blink of an eye." Anan took over the position of Small Bamboo Valley leader. This day, she rode her sword to Big Bamboo Valley to visit her senior sister Wenmin, who had already married Big Bamboo Valley leader Song Darren. The two senior sisters had not seen each other for many days. Naturally, they had a good chat when they saw each other, chatting from morning till noon. Anan then stood up and bade farewell. Song Darren and Wenmin sent her out together. The three of them stood outside Observe Silence Hall. Anan looked around, smiled, and said to Wenmin, "This place seems very quiet, suits senior sister's temperament." Wenmin smiled and nodded. Song Darren also smiled and said, "Actually, Big Bamboo Valley was quite lively, just that these days the few junior brothers all went out to cultivate. Naturally, it was quiet. Also, we used to have a big yellow dog here. It's a big dog that my master raised since it was young. Who knew that it would disappear these few days? Even its barking can't be heard. It's really strange." Wenmin rolled her eyes at him, said, "Most likely it is because De Huang dislikes the food you fed. It is too disgusting. That's why it ran away." Song Darren laughed, did not mind. Anan looked at the loving couple. Her heart was comforted. After a few jokes, she bade farewell and left Big Bamboo Valley. Her white dress fluttered, riding her sword. This day she suddenly felt vexed, did not want to return to Small Bamboo Valley immediately. Maybe it was the loving scene of her senior sisters that moved her. For a moment, she felt she could not control herself. Unknowingly, she had already left Qingyun Hill, came to the Grass Temple village ruins that she once yearned for day and night. The grass was luxuriant, the breeze blowing, as if nothing had changed. She stood silently for a long time, sighed softly. On her elegant face, some hidden sorrow seemed to be added. Striding forward, she slowly walked, strolling into the depths of the ruins. Broken fences and broken walls, divided into two sides, and the grass and breeze quietly stood. She quietly walked forward, her eyes blurred, quietly looking around, her eyes filled with tenderness. Suddenly, her body trembled, and she stopped in her tracks in disbelief. Deep in the ruins in front of her, there was actually a new, simple, and crude wooden house. There was a crooked chimney that was still emitting light smoke. Outside the house, there were two piles of firewood. Under the eaves, there was a small wind chime. On top of the wind chime, there was a piece of green cloth that was tied to it. In a gentle breeze that blew over, it made a clear sound. An alluring fragrance drifted out from that wooden house. Woof, 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 woof. Gee, gee. A burst of strange sounds suddenly rang out from that wooden house, followed by a yellow shadow flashing. It was a big yellow dog, its face full of joy. It spread out on all four legs. On the back of the dog, there was a gray monkey riding on its back. It had a rare face. It had 3 eyes, one hand holding a fragrant meat bone, the other hand tightly gripping the yellow dog's neck. It was shouting, probably urging the yellow dog to run faster. Then a man ran out from the house, wearing coarse clothes, with a bitter smile on his face, shouted, "Stupid dog! Stupid monkey! You came to steal meat bones again." Suddenly he was stunned. His eyes reflected the figure of Lou Swecky standing in front of him. The two of them stood like this, motionless, staring at each other. How many years, how many feelings and sorrows in the world. Suddenly, in this deep gaze, suddenly, they both laughed at the same time. A light breeze blew. Under the eaves, a bell rang in the wind. The corner of the green cloth gently fluttered, as if with a bit of laughter. The crisp sound of the bell floated up with the wind, echoing between heaven and earth. End of the book. Chapter 500. Shah Danan, an ordinary youth at the foot of Mount Jadian, stubborn and determined. Posey valued him and taught him fawn wisdom. Later, because of the mysterious massacre of the village, he was accepted by Jadian and became the disciple of head of Bamboo Peak, Tion Belize. Many years later, when the good and evil battled, the secret in his heart was revealed. Because of his grief and anger, and because Bailu blocked the Zhu Xian's sword for him and was heavily injured, he betrayed Jadian and joined the Falcon. He changed his name to Ghostly and searched everywhere for a way to save Bailu. 10 years later, he met Anan again. After fighting side by side for many times, they developed a deep relationship. But the good and evil opposed each other. After the second war between the good and evil, Bailu went missing. Under the guidance of Anan and Whitey, she finally defeated the devil in her heart and returned to Jadian. She used the Zhu Xian sword formation to repel the second great attack of the Falcon. After that, she lived in seclusion in Grass Temple Village with Ash and Goldie as companions. Then she met Anan. Chapter 501. Anan, Jadian Bamboo Height, Shui, Yu Master's favorite disciple, has a peerless beauty and cultivation talent. Gifted and intelligent, cold as frost, has the rare treasure Aeolian firmus, mysterious background. Because Shah Danan risked his life to save her, went through thick and thin together, she could not forget him. 10 years later, they met again, developed feelings for each other. After many life and death trials, they understood each other, deeply loved each other. Anan was loyal to love, rejected Funxiang Valley Master's favorite disciple, Li Su's marriage proposal. Ghostly, who was thousands of miles away, wanted to bring Anan away, but Bailu did not wake up, so he gave up. After the good and evil war, Anan helped Ghostly to get rid of his inner demon, became Shah Danan again. Several days later, she met Shah Danan in Grass Temple Village. They smiled at each other. Chapter 502. Bailu, the daughter of Falcon Vim, faction headmaster. Her beauty was like a flower. Her appearance was amazing. She was skilled and brave, but because of the past events in her childhood, she mistakenly entered Blooddrop Cave with Shah Danan in Forsaken Abyss, witnessed the past of Falcon Elders, and accidentally obtained the treasure Hawan Bell. In the desperate situation, she went through life and death with Shah Danan, and fell in love with him. Also resolved the years of estrangement between her and her father. Influenced by her father, she was not bound by common sense, free and easy. Later, for Shah Danan, she used the spell of infatuation to block the Retribution Ancient Sword, saved Shah Danan, but fell into a coma. Luckily, one of her soul was captured by the Hawan Bell, so her body was not destroyed. Later, she disappeared during the collapse of majestic Fox Mountain, her life and death unknown. Chapter 503. Bei Bei, an ordinary youth at the foot of Jadian Hill, talented, childhood playmates with Zhang Xiao Fan, experienced the massacre of the village together, was accepted by Jadian, worshipped under Dragonhead Peak Taoist Vaskalo. After the Battle of Jadian, coincidentally met the mysterious old man, Wan Jin Yi, who lived in seclusion in Jadian Founder's ancestral hall, learned martial arts for 10 years. Loyal, never left Zhang Xiao Fan. After mistakenly thinking that Ghostly killed Wan Jian, broke off relations with Ghostly, Zhang Xiaofan. Chapter 504. Tian Belize, the head of Jadian Bamboo Peak, a short and fat man, profound in cultivation, stern on the outside, but protective on the inside. Later, because Reverend Doyle Shun was attacked by Zhu Xian, she tried to persuade Doyle Shun, but was seriously injured in the battle and was later stabbed to death by Aeolian Firmus in order to protect Zhang Xiaofan. And also because Tian Belize was being controlled, he used his eyes to beg her. Chapter 505. Hede, the only daughter of Tian Belize and Serene. She is very smart and talented. She grew up with Shah Danan. She was Shah Danan's crush when he was young. She loved Shah Danan like a little brother and married Kevern. Kevern, Dragonhead Peak's head master Vas Kalo's favorite disciple. His cultivation is profound. After Master Vas Kalo rebelled, he was elected as Dragonhead Peak's headmaster. Chapter 506. Kevern, the proud disciple of Dragonhead Peak's Taoist Vas Kalo. His skills were profound, and he was one of Jadian's younger generation's outstanding talents. After Vas Kalo betrayed the sect, he was elected as Dragonhead Peak's Taoist master. Chapter 507. Xiao Bai, Nine-Tailed Celestial Fox, an exceptional demon who had trained for 1,000 years, was suppressed in Funxiang Valley's Inferno Altar for 300 years and was rescued by Ghost Li using the Inferno Mirror. She turned into a woman, her charm seeped into the bones, able to turn all living things upside down. Chapter 508. The Beast God, a fiery red and demonic youth, the god of 10,000 beasts, cultivated for millions of years just for a woman, Ling Long. He abandoned his immortal body just to be with the one he loved. The beast god only had Ling Long in his eyes and heart. As long as Ling Long was there, he wouldn't hesitate even if his bones were crushed. Celestial Bane's error-free chapters will continue to be updated on Qingdao Novel website. There will be no advertisements on the website, so please bookmark and recommend it to Qingdao Novel website. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.